Good afternoon and welcome to the Family Research Council lecture series, and good afternoon to our live audience as well as our online audience. My name is Irina Grosu and I'm the director of the Center for Human Dignity here at FRC. Today's event is on pornography as a public health crisis. In recent years, leading experts across a variety of disciplines agree that pornography use is, in fact, addictive and a public health crisis. Over the protest of those who advocate for radical sexual license, what has long been classified as a harmless, personal expression of sexuality is actually a behavior that is destructive not only to the addict, but also to his or her community. From an addict's spouse to a trafficked teen on the other side of the country or the world, pornography consumption and addiction makes victims of many, degrading and commodifying human beings and exposing them to harm. It is for this reason that the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, NCOSE, is using a multifaceted approach, calling on the media, legislators, and businesses to join them in exposing this public health crisis. Halverson joins us to tell us more about the effort to reveal the consequences of pornography addiction and combat the industry that fuels it. I am pleased to introduce Haley, who is a former intern at Family Research Council, where she worked on this very issue, among other topics. She is now the Director of Communications for NCOSE. Haley cares deeply about human rights and the issue of sexual exploitation, particularly regarding those that are exploited by the sex industry. In her role, Haley acts as a spokesperson for NCOSE and oversees strategic messaging development, press outreach, email marketing, social media marketing, and creative video production. Haley graduated from Hillsdale College, summa cum laude, where she double majored in politics and interdisciplinary religious studies and conducted a senior thesis on the abolitionist argument against prostitution. Haley has appeared and been quoted in multiple media outlets, including The Washington Post, The New York Post, Voice of America, USA Radio Network, Washington Times, Christian Post, EWTN News Nightly, and American Family News. Without further ado, please help me welcome Haley Halverson.
Well, thank you so much, Irina, for that kind introduction, and thank you to FRC for hosting me to be here and giving me the opportunity to speak about this important topic. To dive right in, to tell you a little bit more about the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization based here in Washington, D.C. We work with the mission to address the public health crisis of pornography and to also expose the links between all forms of sexual exploitation. We do this with the belief that every individual has a right to sexual justice, a term that we define to mean freedom from sexual exploitation, objectification, and violence. So, the problem of pornography. I would like us all to stop and think a minute about a world where cigarettes are provided freely in every home, whether you want them or not, for the young and the old. Maybe a world where cigarettes are handed out at schools or in the public library. A world where pop culture stars talk about how smoking is empowering and actually helpful to your health. By the end of the day, I hope to have shown you the ways that pornography is just as harmful as cigarettes, if not more, and that pornography is causing a public health crisis in America today. So first of all, to define pornography, it's a very generic term. The Webster's International Dictionary defines it as a depiction, as in writing or painting, today we now know video, of licentious or lewdness, a portrayal of erotic behavior designed to cause sexual excitement. This is a different term from obscenity, which is a legal term, which you can learn more about in Miller v. California. It's interesting to note that obscenity is actually illegal under federal law to distribute via hotel, motel, internet providers, and more. But today we're just talking about pornography in general. So now, what is a public health crisis? It's interesting that there's not actually a very clear consensus on what the definition of a public health crisis is. The World Health Organization defines it as a situation that's perceived as difficult. The CDC in 2012 said that a crisis tends to occur when an unexpected or threatening event requires an immediate response. I would raise the bar even further and say that we should define a public health crisis as a serious, harmful problem that affects individuals or groups beyond their capacity alone to correct. And I believe that pornography would fit this definition. Pornography is pervasive. We're going to see that pornography is beyond the ability of one individual or family or church's ability to correct. Children are being exposed at young ages. 27% of older millennials first viewed pornography before puberty. 49% of surveyed college males reported first viewing pornography before age 13. This is important to note because the younger that someone is exposed to pornography, the less control they have over the way it shapes their sexual templates, and the more likely they are to struggle with some form of compulsive porn use. We also know that 64% of people ages 13 through 14 actively seek out pornography weekly or more. And while this is typically a situation that's discussed about the problem of men, we also know that it's becoming an increasingly big problem for women as well. Teenage girls and young women are more significantly likely to seek out pornography than those who are 25 years older and above. This makes sense when we think about the context of our culture that is so internet saturated that, kids are being handed mobile phones often before they can walk. So with this first question being, is the problem of pornography beyond an individual or family's ability to correct, we see that it definitely is affecting children. Also, like big tobacco, pornography industry is profit-driven. 2015, one pornography website alone had over 87 billion views. That's 12 videos per person on Earth. Top countries included the US as lucky number one. This shows that this industry has an interest in keeping it going. It is a business. They know how to market. Often we hear from individuals who are struggling with pornography explaining that they first were exposed from a pop-up during a video game. This industry knows that if they can hook their users young to get them devoted to their brand, then they'll have a larger likelihood of keeping them for life. No one says it better than Dr. Gail Dines from Culture Reframed, who said, "We are in the midst of a massive social experiment, one that is reshaping the lives of young people all over the globe. Never before have children and youth had complete access to hardcore porn that is based on degradation, debasement, and humiliation of women." Unfortunately, we also are having an increased number of reports from young men themselves who are struggling with this problem. One 14-year-old boy writes, "I want help. I want it to end. I want to be able to go to school and not have pornography on my mind." A 17-year-old boy writes, "So many of my thoughts and so much of my time is consumed by porn that it is alarming. Porn has such a powerful control over my life. I don't know what to do." This does not sound like somebody who is in control, somebody who perceives themselves as in control of their porn use. A quote that I don't have here, unfortunately, is also the many testimonies we get from concerned parents and church leaders on these issues. So many mothers have written in to us explaining how they filter pornography out of their internet at home, how they talk to their kids about the problems of pornography. But still, their children are being exposed. They might go to a friend's house and someone will show it to them there. Or they might have a pop-up come up that their parents couldn't exile out of the situation. They also are being exposed at places like schools and public libraries. It's alarming to know that most schools and public libraries do not have adequate filtering software. if they have filtering software at all. I know our president, Patrick Truman, was at a conference recently where a 14-year-old girl stood up and said, "My brother got addicted to pornography at school." And so we see that it is a problem. It's something that is not controllable at the individual level because you can't filter the whole internet. You can't keep someone from showing your child pornography, even if you yourself are trying to keep it out of your home. So seeing that pornography is unmanageable at the individual level, is it a serious and harmful problem? Today, I want to go over 3 harms of pornography with you, the ways that it affects the brain, the body, and sexual violence as well. Peer-reviewed research and anecdotal evidence combine to reveal a very clear picture here. Pornography has undeniably negatively impacted the brain, the body, and sexual violence in our society. So, the brain. Since 2011, there have been 24 major studies that have revealed porn has negative and, in fact, detrimental effects on the brain. This is important to realize that there is so much science and peer-reviewed research backing up these claims. Pornography use has actually been shown to physically shrink the brain. A 2014 study found that increased pornography use is linked to decreased brain matter in the regions of the brain associated with motivation and decision-making. Porn use is also contributed to impaired impulse control and desensitization to sexual reward. Now, I don't know if we have any brain surgeons in the room, but I think that this brain science isn't so much brain science. It's pretty clear to recognize that decreased brain matter in the areas of motivation or an inability to control your impulse is pretty bad for society and for the individual as well. It's also important to realize that until the mid-1990s, we didn't realize that learning could actually shape the brain. But in the mid-1990s, research came out showing that violin players would often have areas of their brain that were enlarged around hand controlling motions. And that region of their brain would be larger depending on how early the person had first started the violin. Similar studies have been found showing differences in brain development and brain regions for jugglers or for taxi cab drivers. And so we see that it's pretty clear that pornography should be able to change the brain. It would be the only method of learning that doesn't change the brain if it didn't. In fact, a study out of 2006, and I believe it was the Journal of Neuroscience, found that medical students had increased brain region growth in areas of key learning when scanned between the 3 months before and after a major test. And so it makes sense, again, as I said, that pornography use would impact the brain physically. Porn use also escalates. A 2015 MRI study from Cambridge found that compulsive sexual behavior is characterized by novelty seeking, conditioning, and habituation to sexual stimuli in males. So this means that users need more extreme content over time in order to achieve the same level of arousal. This is very similar to what we find in narcotic addicts, where they need more and more of a substance in order to achieve the same old high. The study also identified a disassociation between desiring and wanting. So this is a hallmark of addiction, where somebody doesn't really like the sexually explicit materials, but they have an increased craving for them, and so they aren't really able to stop, even though they don't actually like the activity. Pornography hijacks the brain's reward systems. Compulsive porn users' brains, they light up just like a cocaine addict's when shown pornography cues as compared to normal controls. This is alarming. If we ever see something that's happening in the brain that directly mirrors cocaine, it's probably a health risk. Dopamine is flooding the nucleus accumbens, and it's rewiring the brain systems so that they are more associated with pornography. We also have problems of pornography with the body. Pornography use is linked to negative body image, porn-induced erectile dysfunction, and sexually transmitted diseases. I know that negative body image might not necessarily fall within a public health model, but I think it's important to note, not only for its big impact on our culture, but also the fact that there are a good number of suicides every year that deal with poor body image. What's interesting about this is that negative body image does not only impact the females, it does impact men. 2015 study found that male frequent pornography use is linked to body image insecurity regarding muscular and body fat, and to increased anxiety in romantic relationships. Women, as a result of viewing pornography, report lowered body image, body type criticism from their partners, and increased pressure to perform acts seen in pornographic films. So this is important because men are viewing pornography. They see that they don't compare to these hyper-masculine images. And also, women are being pressured not only by the images, but also by the men who are saying, why don't you look like the woman on the screen? Why don't you act like the woman on the screen? We're also seeing an alarming increase in porn-induced erectile dysfunction. A study of sexually active young males, 16 to 21 years old, found 26.4% exhibited problems with erectile function. Now, this is a big deal because typically erectile dysfunction is something that plagues men 40 or older, if not older than that. It was before the advent of the internet, the mid-1990s, and the boom of the pornography industry. Young men, especially 16 to 21 years old, almost never struggled with this problem. But now more and more are having this problem. A 2015 study of online sexual activities among males found that 20% said that one motive for their porn use was to maintain arousal with their partner. It also found that pornography use was linked to higher sexual desire, but lower overall sexual satisfaction and lower erectile function. This is a quote from one man who speaks out about his experience with porn-induced ED. He's from Reboot Nation, which focuses on these issues. He says, "How could I possibly have erectile dysfunction? I was only 23 and physically healthy. I went searching and found long threads online of guys saying they thought porn had caused their ED. Unbelievable, but it turns out it potentially had for me too. It took me 9 months to recover normal sexual function." He goes on to describe how he went through all of the different factors trying to eliminate the reasons that could have caused his problem. He knew it was not anxiety since he had a lot of sexual experience, and particularly with his current partner. He knew that it was not alcohol related because he was not drunk at the time when he was having these problems. He even went to a doctor to have his hormones checked. But again, they came back normal. He said it wasn't a blood pressure problem, it was a brain problem. He had actually wired his sexuality to the screen, to pixels on a screen, rather than a real person. We also see a link between pornography and sexually transmitted disease. Pornography use among adult males in America is associated with increased engagement in sexual behaviors that increase the risk of STIs. So what are these sexual behaviors? They range from everything from having sex with multiple partners, to buying sex from a prostituted or trafficked person, to having had an extramarital affair. And again, public health is all about harm reduction. So whenever we see an industry that is directly tied to increased likelihood of STDs, that's something we want to pause and to note for public health concerns. Pornography is vastly sex negative. One former porn user once told me that quitting pornography was the most sex positive thing he had ever done. It's rewiring your brain to pixels on a screen rather than a real person. And we know that research from 2014 from Sons and Bridges shows that porn users found that they needed to use pornography more often in actual sexual encounters, that they had to conjure images of pornography in order to maintain arousal throughout sexual encounters, and that they rated their sexual enjoyment with real partners lower after having had extensive pornography use. So this hardly sounds like an empowering or positive thing to add to anybody's sexual template. And the third of our problems here is sexual violence. Pornography shapes the user's sexual templates around themes of degradation, unclear consent, and violence. I really like this graphic. I think it's true. Pornography lies. It says that women are tools to be used and that men are inevitable predators. But what happens is that when the same message is sent over and over again, some people start to believe it. Pornography teaches that women enjoy sexual violence. An analysis of the 50 most popular pornographic videos, those bought and rented most often, found that 88% of the scenes contained physical violence, and 49% contained verbal aggression. 87% of the aggressive acts were perpetuated against women, and 95% of their responses were either neutral or expressions of pleasure. A man was far more likely to be upset in pornography when confronted with aggression than a woman. This is alarming. The lessons of pornography are learned. We know from cognitive script theory that media has an important role in shaping how people perceive the world. It shapes how people think that they should act, how people think that others will respond to their actions, and what the ultimate conclusion of those actions will be. And so when somebody thinks that they're watching pornography, and again, look back to that research that the majority of a good number of these people were exposed before puberty, they're getting their sexual education from pornography. This might be what they first learn about sex, and that is that it is violent and that women like it. That women like to be slapped, to be forcibly penetrated, to be kicked, to be gagged. That women think that violence is sexy, is what pornography teaches. Pornography is linked to increased verbal and physical aggression. A meta-analysis done of 22 studies in 7 different countries confirmed these findings. And a meta-analysis, for those unfamiliar with research, is one of the strongest forms of research that you can do. This is a very solid finding. It found increases in verbal and physical aggression among males and females alike. One boy writes, "I gradually became desensitized and escalated to more extreme, brutal, and degrading videos. That hurts me even more," he wrote, "because I'm a sensitive and empathetic person and would never want anyone to suffer, especially not girls or young women in real life. It is devastating and cruel to see how you can get accustomed to practices you would naturally find disgusting and inhumane." Other boys write, "I would play out violent fantasies at school of what I would do with different girls, and all this was happening before 14. I came close to raping a girl younger than me to satisfy my pleasure," said one 16-year-old boy. We're hearing from the people who are struggling with pornography, from children and young men alike, and from some women as well, that it is negatively affecting them, that it is causing them to have more thoughts about sexual violence. And this is something that we need to hear. Instead of telling them, no, this is good for you. No, this is helping you learn more about maybe how to please a woman. We need to hear from them what their experiences are. Pornography is associated with sexual offenses and accepting rape myths. These are all findings that are confirmed by the testimonies of young men that we are receiving. A meta-analysis of 46 studies reported that the effects of exposure to pornographic material are clear and they are consistent, and it puts one at increased risk for committing sexual offenses and for accepting rape myths. For those who don't know, rape myths are beliefs such as that no means yes, that women enjoy rape, or that the way a woman's dressed could be inviting rape. The fact that pornography is increasing these beliefs in young men should point to some reason why we're having such a crisis of sexual assault on college campuses. Do people stop and think, why are we having a crisis of sexual assault on military bases or in our communities? I believe that pornography is one of those reasons. We also are finding increased research that pornography is linked to domestic violence and to sexual abuse. The use of pornography by batterers significantly increases a battered woman's odds of being sexually abused. Pornography use alone increased the odds by a factor of almost 2, and in combination with alcohol, it increased the odds by a factor of 3. Another study reproduced this general trend. I believe it was a 2015 study in local Ohio that also saw that pornography use in domestic violence situations greatly increased the odds of sexual abuse. On a grander scale from the individual, we also know that pornography is fueling the demand for sexual exploitation in general, whether that is buying a prostituted person or a sex trafficked person. An analysis of 101 sex buyers compared to 100 men who did not buy sex found that sex buyers used pornography more often than non-sex buyers. They also used more types of pornography, reported that their sexual preferences changed to include more violent, sadomasochistic, and anal sex. So these men who are going out to buy women are likely to be users of pornography. This makes sense on our basic understanding of economics. There is a high demand for commercial sex. So pimps and traffickers, being the entrepreneurs that they consider themselves to be, are there to recruit more women to supply it. That might be women who are voluntarily deciding to enter into this industry, or women who are being coerced into it in order to meet the demand. Pornography itself is also a form of sexual exploitation. Here is a quote from a former pornography performer that is hard to read, but is important for everyone to hear and to recognize is happening. Rachel says, "The producer told me everything would be fine, and that it would just be like rough sex. They might want me to vomit a little, but it would be easy money. When I was finished with the scene, my throat was bleeding. I had bruises all over my body. My vagina was torn in 2 places, and I ended up with pink eye. I felt so weak, used, and honestly felt like I had been raped all over again. I swore I would never do porn again." Unfortunately, this is not the only testimony like this that we have. We actually have far many that are more graphic and more disturbing than this. We know from testimonies of many former pornography performers that drugs and alcohol are common on set in order to help numb their bodies to the experiences. And also that there's common pressure to perform acts that might not have originally been on their list of acts they were willing to do. And also that there is a lot of pressure from certain producers and agents to prostitute themselves out to certain VIP clients. This is the topic of a whole other conversation about the harms of pornography, but suffice it to say that when there is more pornography, there is more sexual exploitation and sexual violence, even just for the women who are having to bear what is happening on the screen. It's important to just take a moment and to recognize what pornography actually is. Pornography is prostitution for mass consumption. It is conveyed through photographs, magazines, books, videos, the internet. But what it is a prostituted act that is allowing for the masses of individuals to derive sexual stimulation and gratification from viewing it. It's turning a person on one side of the screen into a vicarious participant in prostitution. So this has all been thoroughly depressing. I think the problem is very clear. We see that it's not only pervasive, it's impacting children, whether or not their parents are trying to help prevent it. And it's also harming the brain, the body, and having a negative impact on sexual violence in the culture. So what can we do? This conversation actually comes at a very interesting time in the political landscape because the RNC has recently added pornography as a public health crisis to its platform. This was a big debate this year and has met a lot of different opposition and a lot of support. It's interesting to note on the other side of the aisle that I actually think the Democratic National Committee will probably eventually agree that pornography is a public health crisis. In the DNC's party platform this year, they make a big statement about how they must stand against sexual violence against women. And they say that we have to address prevention efforts in order to stop sexual violence against women. I think it's pretty clear that pornography needs to be part of those prevention efforts. So actually, I see politically that this is not a partisan issue. This is an issue that everyone, whether they are concerned about the human dignity, the value of family, the impact that it has on women, can all come together and agree on this. Our organization, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, regularly works with everyone from the religious far right to liberal Marxist feminists. And we can all come together and agree that pornography is causing a public health crisis and is contributing to sexual violence against women. Another way you can get involved is through attending the Coalition to End Sexual Exploitation Summit. This is happening this September 29th through October 1st in Houston, Texas. This is a great place where you can get involved and you can get equipped. All of the leaders in this movement across the nation and locally in Houston will be coming together in order to learn the latest research, also to strategize on a national level about how to address this problem. Relationships formed at the summit last year actually helped pass the Utah resolution declaring pornography a public health crisis this last year. So really, if you're interested in being involved or learning more, this is the place to be. You can learn more at endexploitationsummit.com, and there are group and student discounts available. You can also take action against facilitators of sexual exploitation. There are a lot of ways that you can do this. First of all, just take a look in your own lives, in your own communities, what kind of corporations you're supporting with your money or with your time. Another way you can get involved is by going to the dirtydozenlist.com. The Dirty Dozen List is a project that we put on that addresses the top 12 mainstream contributors to sexual exploitation. These are mainstream companies that you wouldn't necessarily think are facilitating these kinds of things, but they are. One exciting thing about this is that there actually is ability to create real-world change. We've recently had so many victories from this list that I can't list all of them for you. Some of them include, in the last calendar year, 4 major hotels have stopped selling on-demand pornography. That was a result of the Dirty Dozen list. People are able to go onto this website and you can sign emails, you can send petitions, you can send out tweets and spread the word to your friends. And Hilton Hotels was one of the hotels that stopped selling on-demand pornography. And they told us that at one point they were receiving over 1,000 emails a week from our supporters. This is important because it means that your voice actually does matter. It actually can change corporations' minds on these issues. And so taking actions like these are important. Other victories include Google is no longer linking ads to pornographic content, and the Department of Defense, is no longer selling pornography on Army or Air Force bases. So this is a depressing subject, but there is positive change happening, and we hope for only more to come. Also, you can share resources. You can offer yourself as a resource first to your friends and to your family, for those who are struggling with pornography, for parents who are trying to protect their kids, spouses who are struggling with their partner's problem as well. We have an entire list of resources for these various sections and others on endsexualexploitation.org/resources. And there you can find some faith-based, some internet filters, some help for parents on how to talk to your children, and more. So with all of that said, I think that porn today will actually follow the trend of the tobacco industry and public perception. Pornography is the new tobacco, and that's good news. Pornography is pervasive and popular today. There's no denying it, and it's a really serious problem that we have to address. But so was smoking in the 1950s. It was popular. Everybody did it. It was considered glamorous. But as the harms became more apparent, as the research was sent out to the public and was able to be digested by them, both general public and elected officials demanded a public health approach to the problem. And similarly, I think that we're going to be able to use all of this research and resources in order to show that we need a multidisciplinary public health approach. This can be implemented across the country in countless ways, whether from increased state-funded research on the problem, also to just increase public awareness. So that is all that I have for you today. I hope that it is somewhat encouraging that we do have the chance to actually create a difference on this issue. There is so much momentum on this issue right now. It being addressed at the national level and the state level is a really big deal, and I actually think that we are at a tipping point culturally where within the next 10 years we're going to see a radical shift in the way that the public perceives the problem of pornography. So with that, I would like to open the floor to any questions. If anybody has some, I would love to answer.
Hi, Penny Starr with CNS News. Good to meet you in person.
Nice to meet you too.
The Dirty Dozen list. Did you contact each of those entities and express your concern, and which ones responded?
Of the 12 on our list this year, yes. Every year we'll send them a notification letter outlining the harms that their corporation is causing, and then also asking them to change the specific policies that we have in mind. And so this last year, Starwood Hotels, you might have seen, was on there. They actually changed their policy in February, I believe, to stop selling on-demand pornography. Trying to think if we've heard from others. Verizon is a big one right now. They sell on-demand pornography through their Fios and cable services. They have whole channels dedicated to online pornography, which is actually, as an aside, really disturbing. We just got a letter last week from a 90-year-old woman, doesn't have access to internet, but was writing in because she was addicted to pornography because of pornographic channels on cable. So that is a big problem. So we actually bought stock in Verizon so that we could attend their shareholders meeting. And our Vice President of Education and Outreach, Lisa Thompson, met face-to-face with Lowell McAdams, their CEO, and we've explained to them the problem of their involvement in the distribution of pornography. We have continued communications with them, and we're hopeful that they will change policies. Mm-hmm.
On the Dirty Dozen list, I saw Amnesty International among several other. HBO was not surprising, but yes, for me, and also the American Library Association, those two, the librarians and the international human rights people at Amnesty. Can you explain why both of those are on the Dirty Dozen list?
Yes, I would love to. Those are often the two that raise eyebrows the most. The ALA is on there because they adamantly oppose pornography filters in public libraries. They misinform libraries, telling them that it's actually against the First Amendment for them to filter out pornography. This is not true. The Supreme Court has actually ruled against that claim and has said that it is within the library's rights to filter out pornography in order to protect children from the harms. So that's the reason that the ALA is on there. They're quite radical in their positions about it, actually. And interestingly enough, Carla Hayden, former president of the ALA, was recently became the Librarian of Congress, and she actually pivoted on her position when asked about it and said that now she supports pornography filtering in libraries. So hopefully the ALA changes their stance too, but I'm not so sure. As for the Amnesty International, they this last year passed a resolution, a policy document calling for the decriminalization of prostitution. This is a little bit of a different subject, so I don't want to go too into depth on it, but we can talk afterwards. Decriminalizing is the most harmful way to approach prostitution, and we think that they're using their platform really to aid sex traffickers and pimps rather than the women who are being exploited. So that's why they're on there.
Yeah, hi. I've often heard from people who defend pornography, or just read that they say that, oh, well, if you make laws against pornography to restrict it, that's like censorship. So what would your defense be in response to that argument?
I would say that I would trust the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has ruled that it is not. What's something that people don't often know is that obscenity, which is hardcore pornography, Miller v. California, like I mentioned earlier, is actually not legal to distribute it. Hotel, motel, internet, retail stores. Then the Supreme Court has ruled that it does not violate the First Amendment. So, and actually, just within the last 10 years, we have not had any prosecutions of obscenity. But in 2012, an old obscenity case kind of came over from the Bush administration in Los Angeles, and they won in declaring that it was illegal to be distributing this material. And if we can win a case in 2012 in Los Angeles saying that they should not be distributing pornography, then I think we can win it anywhere.
Hi, Evan Wilt from Our World Magazine. You've touched on this a little bit, but I want to talk about, I guess, jumping off of that question from the public policy standpoint. I mean, you mentioned Utah, they passed their resolution. You mentioned the RNC putting that on their party platform. But also, there was some news earlier this week that Donald Trump signed a pledge with a group I believe they were called Enough is Enough to say that he was going to advocate for these changes. What's your response to that? Do you put any weight in that? And kind of what practically can we see as far as, I guess raising awareness is the first step, but then what's after that? What kind of policy changes can we realistically expect?
Oh, that's a good question. Hopefully I can remember all of it. So as far as Trump signing that petition, it's really that pledge, it's really interesting that actually Hillary Clinton's campaign also responded and said that while they have a policy against signing pledges, they supported the purpose of the pledge. So actually both Clinton and Trump have given favor to this idea of recognizing the harms of pornography, and we think that it's something that should be recognized by everyone. And so we're glad and hopeful that that will continue. As for policy changes that we can expect, it's a little bit difficult. The first step is that we definitely want obscenity laws to be enforced. We would not be having the public health crisis we have today if the DOJ was doing their job and prosecuting these pornographers. In addition to that, we want more state-funded research on these issues, increased public education, and then we can go on from there, but I think if we could get those three things, that would be a big step.
I really regret I had the time wrong, so I missed a lot of your presentation, but it'll probably be on video. Is there an international dimension to your campaign and what you're doing? I work personally a lot on Asia, which, like Japan, is a major source of pornography. It's a major consumer of pornography. It's a major destination for human trafficking. And so is there an international dimension, a foreign policy dimension?
Our organization focuses on the domestic issue, but we work with a lot of international speakers and organizations on this. At our summit that's happening in September, we will have people from all over the world who are attending. We have written policy documents. The Women's Commission on Human Rights of South Korea recently wrote us and asked for some recommendations and descriptions of the problem of pornography and how it relates to prostitution. So we do our best to answer calls to help inform and educate people from around the world, but we specifically more focus our policy advocacy domestically.
Haley, my question is there any effort to bring this kind of education within the abstinence programs / sexual risk avoidance programs, because it seems like that would be a very good home to bring into public schools and also to get funding for?
Yeah, I know that there are some groups that are sort of gearing up on this, that are trying to get some form of sex ed curriculum that addresses pornography as harmful. We aren't specifically involved in that, but even just educating parents is a big first step, and having them know that they need to talk to their kids about this and that it can't be a one-time. The talk no longer applies. It needs to be an ongoing conversation. So we help provide resources to help parents do that. But we aren't specifically involved in any education policy.
Hello, Andres Ultrich, Cato Institute. Do you have the slide about the brain shrinkage up?
Yeah, I'm going the wrong way. I should go back.
Not if it's a hassle. I don't know.
Let's see. Oh, is it not there? I'm like, here you go. Okay, we'll get there.
Okay, so title says pornography use shrinks the brain, but then later it says is linked to decreased brain matter. So with is linked to usually implies correlation, not necessarily causation.
What you're stumbling across is the great research problem of the age, is that causation is nearly impossible to prove. You really just have to look at heavy and significant correlations. Several studies, as I mentioned, 24 studies have been done since 2011 on these issues. This finding was consistent with all of those. And also, it's difficult because ethically, you can't only test someone based on pornography because it would imply just showing them pornography. It's also very difficult in research to find people who have not ever been exposed to pornography to act as a control group. So this is very significant and accurate across several studies. But I mean, we won't ever be able to say caused by, just given the ethics of research.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Haley. Welcome
Hello.
back to FRC.
Thank you.
I saw, we've seen an article, I think it was just in the Washington Post this morning, saying that millennials are actually fewer are having sex, or more are not having sex at all than in previous generations, and have had fewer sexual partners, which we would generally at FRC consider good news. But then I've also seen research showing that that fewer people in the younger generation are entering into either marriage or cohabitation relationships. And we've wondered if pornography has an impact on that. Is pornography making it more difficult for people to enter into any kind of intimate relationship at all?
Yeah, I would definitely say yes. Some of the research that I covered here today showed how men have increased insecurity in sexual encounters due to pornography. Also, I just think that there's a rising number of porn virgins who they have their sexual experiences from pornography alone rather than actual people. There is research, I don't have the citation in front of me, that shows that frequent pornography users also have a lessened desire for marriage. So I definitely do believe that pornography is one of the reasons for those trends.
Yeah, hi. My name is Ken Dante. I worked as a therapist, and so I really saw the addictive nature as you were presenting it. Just a question about millennials, pornography, in virtual reality.
Yeah.
And it seems that more and more life is lived in virtual reality. I'm not even saying pornographically so, but in an altered state. In the 60s, we had drugs. Mm-hmm. Now there's virtual reality. It has the same effect. We used to have a word in psychiatry called schizoid, which meant more internal, not connected with the world, retreating into the self, tendency to be shy and disconnected. And so when I look at the devices, but then add your pornographic content to those devices, making it accessible on demand,
right.
It's like people are living in a dream state, and it's a fantasy state. Some of the dreams are just erotic, in some cases. For other people, it takes on that violent component that you're mentioning, which is the most lethal form. So you're living in this virtual state of fantasy and violence where they connect, and then there's a public almost acceptance of that. But I don't know that I can just separate it between sexual violence and physical violence. We watch so much physical violence and gun violence that there's almost like a bloodlust for that. And mixing sex into that mixture makes it more lethal. So Just thoughts put out there. I
Yeah,
don't know if you have
I definitely agree with you. You know, this living in this virtual reality makes pornography so much more pervasive. In the 1950s or 60s, you had to walk down to the wrong side of town to get a porn magazine, and now it's a click away. And also, we do see that pornographic images and violence are mixed even just in our daily average pop culture and advertisements. I mean, look at Calvin and Klein had an entire ad for their jeans that depicted a gang rape scene. And so we definitely see that spilling over into our pop culture as well.
I was wondering if you could talk about the financial motivation behind the industry. The obvious question for me is, why are so many women still willing to participate in degrading roles? I mean, if I were an actor, there are things that I would not want to do, period, just because
Right.
of being a minority. I just wouldn't do certain things. And then secondly, YouTube, which is obviously a very popular entity, I believe they have some type of rules as to what they would consider acceptable uploads, et cetera. And then there's rules about whether you're supposed to be of a certain age to watch softcore porn. But apparently, they are not including traditional hardcore porn. So do you know anything about the specifics on their rulings?
Right. Well, to start with YouTube, I do know that we've done a lot of work on them. They do have terms of use. They say no pornography, and they say that you can report problems of pornography, but their reporting systems are very flawed. You actually have to watch the pornography and tag the pornographic scenes in order to report it. So we definitely know that YouTube could do better, and we constantly have actions asking them to improve those functions. As for the motivations of women involved in this industry, it's difficult because there are so many, but we do know that a large majority of them have had some form of child or abuse, whether that is sexual or just another form of abuse. Also, often there's the allure of fame. They want to be Insta famous. They want to be Twitter famous. And they're told that this is one way that they can do it. They can become a Kardashian. They can become a Paris Hilton. In an interesting documentary done by Rashida Jones, that now I'm forgetting the name of it, but maybe somebody will remind me later. It displayed the fact that on average for amateur porn, which are the regular girls just getting picked off the side of the street, they usually last about 3 months in the industry. They don't get famous. They don't get rich. They come out with net no gain. And so they're essentially sold a lie. I actually just recently saw a ad on Craigslist calling for girls to perform in porn in rural Michigan. That was an hour away from where I went to school. So it's everywhere. They're being sold a bag of goods that just isn't true.
You mentioned that DOD is working against porn. Do you think this is a cover-up for what they're actually doing in terms of satellite surveillance? They're torturing females by satellite surveillance and have been doing it for 30, 40 years.
Well, I don't know anything about satellite surveillance. I do hope that the Department of Defense will go a step further than just not selling on-demand pornography. They have a problem in the military of violence against women, and especially on deployments of excessive porn use. And so we hope that they will focus on the issue of pornography in their prevention efforts when working with the military personnel as well.
One of the things that I like about what you all are doing at your organization is, I mean, one of the things when you talk about pornography, I mean, it seems very abstract in a sense. It's like it's sort of out there. But, I mean, you've also focused on Game of Thrones, which I think is extremely, I don't know, in a way it's a sort of this kind of weaponization of violence and pornography together in this incredibly alluring sort of package. And it's interesting because, you know, if you actually listen to people talking about it, you know, like on talk shows or something like that, I mean, most of the guys will eventually admit, I've heard, you know, a bunch of TV critics and people like this, you know, they watch it for the porn. I mean, at least, I mean, that's a major component of what's going on there. And I don't know, it just seems to be a very, I guess what kind of shocks me about it is these sort of scenes where you have, like, young women and men sitting in a bar watching some rape scene.
Yeah.
And the women are like, like, this is okay. I don't, I guess this is where feminism leads you in 50 years. Sitting in a bar with, 40 guys who are drunk and thinking that rape scenes and forcing women to walk nude through town is some kind of, like, great liberation. I don't know, but I mean, this is, anyway, I just want to mention, I think it's a very good line of, line of criticism to take.
Well, thank you. I definitely agree. I mean, like I said, pornography culture has become pop culture. And interestingly enough, actually, scenes of Game of Thrones were uploaded to a certain pornography website as pornography for a while, and they had a legal dispute about it. So I think if a porn site is willing to say Game of Thrones is porn, it's probably porn.
Hi, that reminds me of something where I was just watching this show. I want to know if you guys know if there's studies about this sort of thing. There's this new show that was on Netflix where I was watching it, and it's called Stranger Things. And there's a scene where the guy and the girl start getting intimate, and then it's cutting like back and forth between this scary scene and then the sex scene, and you're like, for 1 second you're terrified, and then for 1 second it's like there's sexual arousal. Mm-hmm. And I was just, it was like really jarring and just disturbing and like upsetting to watch. Are there studies about how there's about things like manipulation of your emotions or something like that involved with things that are scary or violent, and then like sexual arousal?
That's a really good point. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but I do know that, it's very clear, the research showing how sexualized violence does, kind of like that cognitive script theory. It tells you, being aroused and being scared, or arousal and violence, those should be linked. And then that flows over into real life experiences as well. So I would need to look up for specific research for you, but I think that's a true recognition of a trend.
Hi, I'm Peggy with the Maryland Coalition Against Pornography. Kind of a two-pronged question following on what Adam asked. If we get to the point of recognizing pornography as a public health crisis, would you want to pursue a model here as Great Britain has taken on? You might want to speak to whether you think that was an effective way that they approached it. And also, do you have the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, in your sights in terms of wanting change there?
Okay, so the UK model that you're referring to, I assume you're meaning their opt-in internet. Something not everyone knows is that the UK recently had a lot of internet service providers opt in to make pornography automatically filtered on all of their Wi-Fi. So this means somebody could still get pornography, but they would have to check a box saying, I want pornography, and provide other verifications of their age as well. This is something that I think has a lot of potential. I don't know if it will be applied in the US, but we're definitely exploring it, and it'll be interesting to see. As far as the DSM, I would be all for getting these issues in there as well. So it's, which domino falls first, I don't know, but those are definitely options that I hope that we can continue to come for. All right, one more question, and then this can be the last.
Just a quick question about the sexual violence slides. Is there like a definition? I'm just a little confused about like how it's.
It'll take me a while to get there. Definition of sexual violence. Yeah. I'm sure that there are in the studies. I think that it's pretty clear what sexual violence means. It's everything from slapping, kicking, spitting, gagging, and etc. So I could get the exact definition for you, but it's those types of actions.
Consent? Is there consent or?
Some of it could be non-consensual penetration.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Thank you, Haley, for that illuminating discussion, and I am so proud of everything you've done, both when you were here at FRC and now working for NCOSE. You guys have had so much success. So let's give Haley a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us for future lectures, either in person or online. You could go to frc.org/events. Thank you so much.
Thank you.